The first step in routing any proposal is to submit an info sheet, which can be found on the VPRP website. Our office receives the copy of the info sheet through email, and a proposal development specialist is assigned to the proposal. A PI will normally work with the same PDS, excuse me, but sometimes if the PDS has a lot going on, or if they're going to be on vacation when the proposal's due, then the proposal might get assigned to a different PDS. The PDS will send an email to the PI with a list of what is needed for routing, and there will be a budget template attached. The personnel shown on the info sheet and their salaries will be listed on the template, and it's important to use this budget template as opposed to any other previous versions because it has the current rates for fringe, tuition, and IDC. The current budget template can also be found on the VPRP website, along with information, excuse me, about budget categories, budget narratives, the routing process and submission process, and many other topics. The OU budget template prepared with ORS assistance is considered the official budget for the proposal. If the sponsor has a budget template that is required with the submission, your PDS may be able to help you with completing that after the ORS budget is finalized. The basic budget template is set up for a proposal of 5 years in a research team of up to 5 people. If you need a template that will accommodate more people or more years, just contact your PDS and they can provide one for you. Now I'm going to switch over to Excel so we can go through a demonstration on how to complete the budget template. Okay, can we see the Excel sheet now?
We can.
Okay, good job. Okay. Excuse me. The first tab in the budget workbook is the info tab. This is where the proposal dates need to be entered. Entering the dates is important because it activates the individual budget sheets so that they'll be included in the cumulative and overview or overall budget calculations. This is also where the IDC limitations or other modifications are set for the workbook. The PDS will normally use the information on the info sheet to enter the proposal dates and go through the questions before they send you the email with the budget attached. If something other than full IDC is requested, the PDS will adjust the IDC rate, and they will send you then a form that has to be completed. It's the request for reduced IDC rates form. It has to be completed for any off-campus instruction or other sponsored activity IDC rates. If the sponsor has a limitation on IDC, the PDS will select yes for the sponsor limitation, and they will enter the IDC or the percentage that they allow. If the proposal is to be submitted to NIH, they'll select yes here so that it activates the NIH modular amount in the budget spreadsheets. And if there's a member of the ARC fee or the ARC is going to be used, then they would select yes for that as well, and it would be included on the budget periods. We'll see that in just a minute. The cost of living, the default is 3%. If a PI wants a different percentage or no increase, that can be adjusted here. The PDS will normally hide any budget periods that aren't being used. And then later, if something changes, they can be unhidden. So you can always add them back if your dates change. Before we move on to the budget period worksheet, are there any questions about the info tab?
Yes. First, I wanted to let you know that I will put the link for the template. I'm pulling it out right now in the chat. You can find it on the OVPRP website. It's actually under right now the website, which we are in the process of getting a new website. But right now it is in several places. Well, actually, it's on the Grant Basics, I think. So I will put that in the chat though. And I do have a question. It says IUC question mark. So could you explain what IUC is? Oh, someone actually put in indirect costs. Can you tell them what the indirect cost is?
Indirect cost is anything not specifically related to the project. Like supplies and equipment, you can relate directly to your project, but things like the personnel in ORS, the buildings, the parking lots, the electricity, that sort of thing that supports your project, but is not directly related to your project. So it covers anything like the running of the university, basically, is how I think of that. Okay. If there's no more, we'll go on to the budget periods. The budget period tabs are where you'll enter information about the funding for the project. We normally consider a budget period to be 12 months, but the PI or the sponsor may want to define a budget period differently. For example, budget period 1 might be 6 months and budget period 2 might be 12 months, or you may have a budget period of 18 months. It's important to remember how each budget period is defined when you start entering salary and tuition information, because you wouldn't want to show someone working for 12 months on a 6-month budget period. There are formulas in the salaries area and in the green shaded cells throughout the spreadsheet. Please do not overwrite the formulas in the green shaded cells, as it can create a lot of confusion later. Salary requests for senior personnel are entered as a percentage of effort based on current salary. In my example, Mary Smith has a 9-month appointment. So her request would be entered as either academic or summer months, depending on when she is dedicating her time to the proposal. So if she wants to request half of 2 summer months, she would enter 50% of 2 months in the summer line. Joe Jones has a 12-month appointment, so his would always be entered as academic months. The spreadsheet is already populated with OU fringe rates and will automatically calculate the salary and fringe being requested. You can see the fringe over to the left, to the right there. For other personnel, you enter the number of employees for each category, and for students, you enter the number of months that they will be working on the project. These cells aren't used in any calculations, but they're used when we do the application for the sponsor. The graduate college has a minimum salary for GRAs, and your PDS can provide that information. But most departments use a higher rate, so check with them too. There isn't currently a minimum rate for postdoctoral students, but the provost office is working on that, and information will be posted on their website when they have that finalized. Both the senior and other personnel sections of the budget are for OU Norman personnel only. Other personnel involved in the proposal who aren't OU Norman employees will be entered in other areas of the spreadsheet, such as subcontracts, vendors, or consultants. Anyone have any questions about the personnel section?
Debbie, I just have one question about the formulas. Are the formulas not locked? The cells not locked?
They're not.
Okay, and is there some plan for the future maybe to lock those so they can't overwrite them?
There aren't, because in some areas, like when we get onto the second period, it automatically puts items in here, but we can overwrite those. I guess some cells could be locked because we definitely don't want them changed, but this has to be allowed to be overwritten, because if you changed to 2 students in year 2, you might want to double that amount. Okay. So it allows some flexibility.
Okay, so maybe we lock the ones we can and the ones we definitely
right. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
The equipment section would include any item with a value of $5,000 or more that has a useful life of more than 1 year. If you are purchasing parts that will be used to fabricate a piece of equipment that will have a value of $5,000 or more and be taggable as an inventory item, that would also qualify as equipment. Expenses are entered on the lines to the left, the description and the amount, and then the total will show up in cell 031. So this is one of the equations where you don't want to overwrite it, because then if you later decide, I want to add another piece of equipment, well, then it wouldn't show up over here. So. Okay, for travel, you would enter the amount for either domestic or foreign over to the left here, and the total will show up in column O. A breakdown of travel costs showing airfare, lodging, per diem, and everything else should be provided in the budget justification. For the participant support section, Participant support costs are related to participants or trainees in workshops or trainings being conducted by the PI as part of the proposal. Some sponsors will also include attendance at sponsor conferences as participant support. No OU employees or personnel involved in the project can be included in these costs. Okay, materials and supplies. Materials and supplies includes project-related expendable supplies and items that do not qualify as equipment, such as computers or laptops that would be under $5,000. The purchase of animals for research would also go under materials and supplies. And the same as with equipment, you'll list them individually in this section. There's room for 6, and you can put the amounts there and it'll add it up. If you had more than 6 items, you could create a little table out to the right, and you could say, see table, and put the amount. And your PDS can help with that if you don't want to mess with it. Publication costs and documentation dissemination includes items such as journal fees, page charges, pamphlets, and poster costs. For this item, you would enter the total right in column O. Notice it's not green, so we expect the total amount to just be set there.
Debbie?
Yes.
We have a question. What if the grant lists a person at another institution as a co-PI? Is that person just considered a subcontract for the purposes of the budget?
Yes, that person would be a subcontract, and we would need subcontract documentation from them. Because if they're from another university, they can't just be on ours. They have to have their own separate part of the proposal. And the only way we wouldn't do that is if they're being a vendor or a consultant, and then they would just go in the other section, or they would go in the consultant services line. So you can ask your PDS for, we have a matrix that helps decide whether they would be a subcontract, a vendor, or a consultant. And then that would help decide what area of the budget they should go in.
And that doesn't affect their status as a co-PI, is that right?
Correct. Yes. Okay. Consultant services. Enter the total in column O and include the details about the rate, the number of days, travel costs, etc. in the justification. For computer services, you would enter the total for computer support fees, such as internet line charges. Next line is subcontracts, and the subcontract information is actually entered on the subcontract tab, and we'll look at that in just a few minutes. Okay, that brings us to tuition remission. Tuition remission, you enter the total hours that graduate students are working on the project in this white set, the white one, the N53. And then the spreadsheet will automatically calculate the tuition expense. So if you have 2 students working 12 hours each, you would put 24 here, and whatever total works for the students, and it'll multiply it out. And the rates are different in years 3, 4, and 5 because the tuition remission is going up. So it'll depend on what the dates are for your proposal. Your PDS may adjust that as well. Let's see. Shipping costs include any costs for shipping materials, supplies, or equipment. Incentives includes any allocation to study participants or incentives for advisory or study groups. So if you're giving them gift cards or t-shirts or anything like that, it would go on that line, and you explain in the budget justification exactly what it is. The other category includes any other things such as fees, testing, for animal care costs, audiovisual services, postage, copying fees, software, the list goes on and on. You would enter the individual items and their expenses in the white area to the left, and the total will show in 061.
Debbie, we have
Yes.
one more question here.
Okay.
So when we were talking about the subcontracts and co-PIs being a subcontract, do we still count the fringe? Is that in the subcontract that you're going to go over?
That'll be in the subcontract, because they will actually need to provide us with a budget that shows their salary, their fringe, any other expenses that will be used as their part of the proposal.
And you'll talk about that when you go to the subcontract tab.
Yes. Okay. All right. You can see over to the right here, we have the NIH modular amount box. That's what will show. There'll be a number here instead of NA. If the PDS is selected yes for the NIH on the info tab. On 064 here is where the ARC fee would show up if we select yes, and we can go back and say, yes, it is an NIH. And yes, we do want to include ARC fee. And so we come back here, we can see that the modular amount is 154.8 and the ARC fee was added in, it's 4,800. Okay. Indirect costs. Down the bottom here, we have indirect costs, which are also called F&A, facilities and administrative costs, IDC, overhead. Different sponsors use different names. They're automatically calculated based on the rate that was shown on the info tab. So if we get, like right now, it's showing our basic rate of 55%. But if we did have a limitation from the sponsor, we would select yes and put 20%. And then we come back here, you can see that that amount has changed. And you can also see that there's an amount in the P column now. This is unrecovered IDC. It's the amount of IDC we weren't allowed to collect based on our negotiated rate. So that's just tracked for internal purposes. And when we send the budget sheet to your sponsor, we wouldn't include that amount because it's just for internal tracking. We would include it if you have a cost share requirement because most people will allow us to include it as part of the cost share. So if you do have cost share, you'll work with your PDS so that they can adjust formulas as necessary to show the cost share in the proposal.
Debbie?
Yes.
We have great questions here. Sorry to keep interrupting.
That's okay. Questions are good.
So can you explain what happens if a funder does not agree to pay indirect costs at all?
Oh, if usually it's put in their guidelines, and we would just put 0 here, and it would show that there are no indirect costs being collected. So you would see 164.8 here, and 164.8 is the total, and all the IDC will be unrecovered then, and we'll just track that for our purposes. We do need something from the sponsor. Either it's stated in their guidelines, or we'll look toward getting something off their website or from somebody at the organization who has responsibility to sign for them. We need something that shows that there is no IDC allowed to be collected. We see that with foundations frequently. Any more questions? Yeah. Okay. So when you go on to budget periods 2 through 5, everything is basically the same. Although, like we were talking about earlier, these will automatically fill in the salaries for the other personnel based on the percentage of increase on the info tab. So if you were to change the percentage of increase to 0, then this is going to show just the same amounts as we had in period 1. But you can also, if you change to two postdoctoral students in year 2, you can overwrite this. But then in year 3, it's going to add the 3%. So it's important to just be aware of that. But you can see that in year 3, we have nothing because we didn't activate that year on the budget info tab. So only the years that the info tab is activated for will any information show up. Year 3 and year 4 include nothing. When you get to the cumulative tab, it's showing us everything from 1 and 2. Excuse me. Okay. And then the overview tab has the, excuse me. The overview tab shows everything by year, all the different categories for each year. Whereas the cumulative is just showing everything by category. It's just the overall for the whole 5 years. The subcontracts tab is where you'll enter the direct costs and the indirect costs for each subcontract organization. You put their name, you put their direct and indirect. It automatically calculates the amount that is subject to IDC, and it takes it to the budget period here that it applies to. It puts in the total, it puts in the amount that is subject to IDC. Okay, so IDC is charged on the first 25,000 of each subcontract budget. And that is for all the work that OU does in setting up the subcontract and reports done and such as that. So that's just the fee that we charge on that. The way that you get these numbers is that when you have a subcontract, you tell us that on your info sheet, and we might ask you a few questions like the PI name and email address or whatever, but we'll email them and we'll say, here's some items that we need for the subcontract. And generally what we need is a letter of intent from their organization, a budget, a justification, a statement of work, and a copy of their rate agreement if they're asking for IDC. So once we have that budget, then we have their direct costs and indirect costs, and that's where we get the information for these. Any questions about subcontracts?
I don't have anything for subcontracts, but I'm going to ask you to go back and talk about two things. First of all, could you go back to this? I think it's the info page, the first page, and talk about the different kinds of IDC, different rates and what that means and when you use them.
Okay, so on campus is what we use most of the time. And it is our general rate, it is 55%. We have OK state agency. So if you're working with, say, one of the state agencies, I can't even think of one, Oklahoma Department of Education, something like that, the rate is 26% because that's the rate we have for Oklahoma state agencies. Other sponsored activity is activities that are being done that are not research. So we do see a good percentage of these. If you're just doing a proposal that is for a training or a seminar and you're not doing any actual research, then you might ask for this rate. And then we have the instruction rate, which is 53.5. We don't really use this a lot. We don't see that very often. And off campus is 26%. If more than 50% of your proposal is taking place off campus, you can request this rate and you just have to fill out the form and get it verified. And everything. We do have the various rates here.
Also, what are the ARC fees?
If you're using the Advanced Radar Research Center, then you would pay ARC fees. There's a fee that is included for using their facilities. It is 3% of direct costs.
Thank you.
Okay. We've already talked about overview and cumulative, so that just leaves us the rates tab. The rates tab is where ORS updates fringe rates, tuition remission, and other information used in various calculations throughout the workbook. So generally, a PI will not need to mess with this tab. The only time you might use it is if you want to use a different cost of living. If you want 1% in year 1 and 3% in year 4 for some reason, you could actually adjust those here instead of using it'll override what's on the info tab. And this is also where we make the adjustment for the tuition. You can see that it depends on your dates as to which tuition rate you're going to use. Okay.
Debbie, can you go just one more time? Can you list the requirements for the subcontracts?
Oh, yes. Okay, so when we have a subcontract, we need a letter of intent from their research office. It's signed by somebody who has the authority to sign for the university. A budget, a justification, a statement of work being done at their institution for the amount that they're receiving. And then if they're asking for indirect costs, we also need a copy of their indirect cost rate agreement. Okay, so once you've completed your budget, you'll send it along with your budget justification and any other routing documents required by your PDS. You'll send those to your PDS and they'll review it and they'll let you know if any changes are needed.
Thank you, Debbie.
Do we have any more questions?
Yes. Yes. So let's see. Addition of explicit lines for shipping incentives. We make lots of orders from common vendors like Fisher Scientific. Do we now need to estimate shipping cost in addition to materials and supplies costs? The invoices include both.
Yes, in the past, we just let everybody lump it into materials and supplies and you just kind of put it all as one. But post-award reps has asked us to have that set out or move it to a separate line. So now, yes, you have to put, say, the cost of purchasing the 100 mice on one line and the cost of shipping them is separate. So yes, it is a little more work to separate it out, but they do request that we do that.
Okay, and also, can you go back and show where you add the raises, the 3%?
Oh, okay. So that is here. The cost of living increase is here, and we generally have 3%. If you wanted to have different rates, say you wanted 3% in year 1, but you don't have enough money to do 3% in year 2, so you want to change it. So it'll do 2% for year 3. Period 3 is what I put here. So yes, in period 1, there is none because you're starting with your current salary, and then you can adjust them here on the rates tab.
So once you put them into the into that, either leave it as a default or put it into the chart, it automatically gives them
Yes.
that raise on the budget period.
Yes. And if you look at here, oh, no, that's not going to help. There. Okay. So it's taking the salary from year one and it's multiplying it by that cost of living, the COLP2. And the COLP2 is this one here. See up in the corner, it says COLP2. So yes, the budget just refers to that cell, so, on the rates tab. And it'll do it for all of the cost of living period 2. If you go to period 3, it's cost of living period 3 is what it's going to refer to. So it always goes back to that rates tab. And the info, the cost of living on the info tab is really just a shortcut to say, I want the same for all the years.
I don't know if you're going to know this right offhand, because I know that we're having a meeting about this. I think this afternoon, but does a percentage of the collected IDC come back to the department? And if yes, what are the restrictions for spending the funds? Do you know that right offhand?
I don't know the restrictions on spending the funds. That would be probably a departmental thing. The percentage of IDC currently and in the past has gone back to the department is called sponsored research incentive. And a portion of the IDC goes back to the department. And what they do with it, yes, I do not know. and I do know that, yes, we are having a meeting and that is all under discussion and changes and such. So that is what is currently happening. So we don't know what's happening in the future yet.
That's what I thought. So just to let you know that the SRI is there are some revisions that are taking place. We'll meet this afternoon. I think we've got several people that'll be meeting to talk about it. And then once we have some kind of framework that we know this is the way we're going to go, I'll put at the very least, we'll have an announcement that will go out. I'll send something out to everyone and let them know this is the new SRI. It's going to be called, I think, FAR, but we'll let you know.
Yeah. And I think eventually then they'll update the website as well.
Right. Thank you, Debbie.
Well, that's all I had. So if there aren't any more questions.
Okay, I have one more. Let's see. For subcontracts, is the IDC $25,000 per year or for the entire duration of the project?
Is $25,000 for the duration. So if someone had, if someone had a $20,000 budget with, oops, I want that to be 10,000, with 10,000 IDC, and they had the same in year 2, then you see that 25,000 is, we collect IDC on that 25,000 in year 1, but in year 2, it's not going to collect IDC on anything. It's only that it'll collect it until it gets to 25,000, and then it stops. So if we collect IDC on the whole 25,000 in year 1, then we're done. Otherwise, we continue on until we get to 25,000.
Let's see. I think the only other one I have here is someone just wanted to know if we're going to notify about the FAR changes, who will be notified. There is an email distribution list. We call it our RIS list. It's all regular faculty. And then there are some departmental staff that have asked to be added to that. So if you are not regular faculty and you want to be on that distribution list, just send me an email at cgclark@ou.edu and I'll add you to the departmental staff. Or we also tend to send out everyone that normally gets the newsletter. So it would be everyone on the RIS list, which are regular faculty, and then those departmental staff who have requested it, along with postdocs. We try to send it out to them and to research scientists. So if you haven't been getting the newsletters and you want to be added, just send me an email and I'll get you added. Okay, I think that's all we have right now. Dr. Ghani, if you will stay on for just a minute, I'll talk to you about that. Is there anyone else that has any other questions before we wrap this up? Okay, I see nothing in the chat. So I want to thank you all for coming today. And Debbie, thank you for presenting. Great job. If you have any questions, I think the big takeaways here are if you have any questions at all on your budget, ask your PDS. They know. They've been working with this for a while, and they're more than happy to talk to you, walk you through it if you need to. And the big thing is that as soon as you send them that the info sheet, as soon as they receive that, they'll send you back an email within 24 hours usually that says, these are the requirements. This is what we need from you. And oh, by the way, here's a budget template. I have filled out everything I can according to what information you put in the info sheet. So you can go ahead and get started on it. So if you have any questions at all, just talk to your PDS.